I am back. Welcome back. Woo! Yes, and for everyone who's online, hello, welcome. We are still live, and we're coming to you live from the Microsoft office in Houston. Everyone's here. Well, not everyone's here. We have an audience, which is great, a great start. So welcome. Thank you for coming out. I hope more folks will come out. My name is Adam Hems. I'm the leader of the Houston user group that we have here. Been doing this now for 7 years, unbelievably. I haven't met all of you. We've got some long-time folks. Hank's been here for a while. He's been here a number of times. Michelle's been here. I don't know how many times Michelle's been here. I don't know. It's been a lot of times. So, but I think Christopher's new. Yes, newbie, welcome. And I can't read your name back there. McKenna is not new. Welcome. Good to see you, McKenna. I didn't get to, you snuck in. I didn't see you, man. Good to see you. Welcome back. Well, welcome back online in person. This is great. We're all enjoying. I should stay on. I realized I'm talking to the room and not staying on the camera. So I'm just not used to doing this whole hybrid thing. This is new. We never used to do the hybrid thing, so I have to learn how to do this. I might get a different camera setup going forward. It was either in person and that was it, or it was online while we were during the pandemic. So now we're going to try and do both. For those folks who are who joined us outside of Houston. So during the pandemic, we had some folks from outside town. We were very welcome to participate and learn with us. We like that. That's fun. That's great. Spread the love. No reason why not. So we'll keep it virtual if I can learn how to do it. But meanwhile, so about this group for the newbies. We've been, like I said, I've been doing this for about 7 years, and the focus of this is around community. So my day job is I do work at Microsoft. Well, technically, we were talking about this earlier, technically out of this building, supposedly, although I'm never here. I think my second time in 2 years that I've been to this office. And before that, I came in about once a month for this meetup. So yeah, but anyway. And so I'm a cloud architect during the day, helping customers, Microsoft customers, migrate to Azure. So I've been doing that for 7 years as well, and Microsoft for like 14 years or so. And so part of this group is an opportunity really because we have folks from all different companies and industries. We have folks, consultants, we have students sometimes joining us. We have folks who are new to the cloud, and we have folks who have been doing it for many, many years. A lot of experience from all industries. We've had state and local government folks. We've had, of course, a lot of oil and gas folks being based in Houston or related in some way to the oil and gas industry. Folks have come in. Josh, welcome. Yeah, you're good. You're good. Well, welcome. Yeah. Sorry, more people coming in. See, I'm still not used to this. I'm not used to this whole virtual thing. So, where was I? So, yeah, and so part of the purpose of this meetup is a chance for everyone to sort of get to know and meet other people and learn from one another, right? It's not just about learning the technology and the problems it solves, because that's helpful, and we're all here to learn some stuff from the presenter, okay, super, but also just from one another if we get a chance, because the journey to the cloud is one I've been doing for since 2013. I've been focused on public cloud full-time, doing nothing but. So seeing essentially the same journey for folks of all kinds in all industries. And it is really a very similar journey, irrespective of the industry or technology that you're using. And so I think what I've seen is there's a lot of opportunity to learn from others who are effectively on the same journey, more than just learning the technology you would use on that journey. And so I feel there's a lot of value in that. And so we've had a lot of good discussions. And this purpose of this group is to bring us together to help facilitate that, because there isn't really another way where folks who are already on the same journey with the same technology, but in different industries and different companies, can learn from one another. Because, like I say, the journey is very, very similar. So that's what we're about. So we're not. So if you're here for a sales pitch, you're in the wrong place. Not a sales pitch. If you're to learn, then you're absolutely in the right place. That is what we're about. And meet others and learn from others. That's what we're here about. So, all right. enough about the group. Tonight's topic is a fun and interesting one, Azure Arc. So we'll talk about that some more. And actually, without further ado, let me hand it over to our speaker tonight, Sepur. So for you, those of you online, this time I have muted microphones and cameras to make it, I don't know, we'll see, make the hybrid experience perhaps a little easier, but chat should be open. So if you have questions for the presenter, then put it in the Teams chat and I will interrupt him and we'll get the questions asked. All right, without further ado, Sepur, you're on, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Adam. Hello, everyone. My name is Sepur Pakbaz. Sorry, you have to hear my voice after his nice accent of Adam's.
Nothing wrong with your voice, Sepur. It's perfect. You can understand you perfect.
Sure. Thank you for coming here and joining online. So let's see if I can control the sorry, it was working before. Do it again. Welcome.
There we go. Now see your window
Welcome.
screen.
Yes. That's the fun of
It wouldn't be fun if it,
if everything would have worked, right?
If it looks too slick, then it looks like it does.
Right.
Perfectly, we all have imposter syndrome.
Right.
All right, there it is. So it's working. So welcome again. There's people online. Can you see me fine online?
Yeah, I can see
Perfect.
it great, Sepur.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. Okay.
So today's topic is Azure Arc. What it is, why should I care? So like Adam was saying, we all in here, like it's a learning experience. It's a shared learning experience. This technology is pretty new. I'm certainly learning, such as just like yourself, as we go. There's a bunch of preview offerings that coming out from Azure Arc that I'm also learning every day. My name is Sepur Pakbaz. I'm a customer engineer at Microsoft. I call myself a developer, pretty much. I help customers to be more successful, pretty much. The agenda for today, we're going to talk about the Azure Arc, of course. We're going to talk about the Arc-enabled servers. We're going to talk about the SQL Server on Azure Arc, and we shift the gear towards the Arc-enabled Kubernetes, and we talk about what it brings us with the Arc-enabled data services and upcoming products. First of all, can you all hear me fine? Okay, I don't use microphone. I don't want it, this to be attached to me. So as long as you hear me fine, I'm guessing people's online hear me fine as well. So let's talk about the Azure Arc. And before we talk about what Azure Arc is, let's talk about how did we get here? Why do we have this product at all, right? So today's customer's needs is much different than what it used to be, right? These days, customers have hundreds and thousands of applications that runs on multiple environments, diverse set of infrastructure. It can be running on different cloud providers, and that's most customers, most of my customers at least, they have solution on most of major cloud providers. That's very wise choice as well, because then you essentially have diversifying your offerings, and also like you get the best deals on all the things. So that's a really good choice to do that. And because of that, it brings a set of challenges from the management perspective, from the security, from policies. There's so many layers that there's a diversity between set of policy, for example, that you set for Azure, control stuff and other cloud providers, or even on your on-prem. So in on-prem or even on edge devices like tiny chips. So it's very common that customers have these situations these days. And how do we fix this problem, right? And Microsoft always been a fan of hybrids since the start. Since they always had this hybrid offerings, this inception of the cloud. They always had this on-prem and Edge and Azure Stack, and others have that too. What we are talking about here is meeting the customers where they are, rather than telling them what to do. So these days, you can't tell customers that say, okay, you should do this. And then maybe 10, 15 years ago, it was like very small setup. They had very small set of workloads. That was possible. Say, okay, this is how you should do it, and that's it. But today's, you can't do that. They have different groups, different teams working on different stacks. They have different skill sets. They work on different cloud providers. So all of that, what inspired for the creation of Azure Arc. Azure Arc have two sides. One side is the infrastructure. So it's helping you essentially setting up the infrastructure either in your on-prem or on different cloud providers to get on board. And the other part of it is the services, which is Arc-enabled services. It's always like they have this Arc-enabled infrastructure and services. So it could be multi-cloud, it could be data centers, it could be on edge. There's a term edge, if you're not familiar with these terminologies. The edge they talking about, like usually the edge of the network, like usually like a tiny chip, or maybe there's a IoT device. That's what they're talking about, the edge. So now that we established the fact that, in fact, I think based on one of those numbers that I read, almost 85% of the customers worldwide, they have some sort of hybrid or multi-cloud solution. So this is like pretty much most of the customers and most of the people using. But that's what the reality is. I mean, but it brings a set of challenges. And these challenges is as follows. There's a complexity. So there's complexity. I need to have better visibility for the health. I need a single pane of glass to be able to manage everything. That's ideal, right? Who wouldn't want that? The IT pros' dream is to manage everything with one pane of glass and apply the policy everywhere. But that's not the case, right? The second is the compliance, and the compliance is a big issue, right? If everything was in one cloud provider, you could manage all the compliance and everything else there. But then that's not the case, like I said. And then the managing these compliances is a really big challenge. So the third one is the inconsistency. So the inconsistency means that you have, like, you're working for a company, most likely your company have different teams, and each team has their own technology stack. They probably even protective of it. They own it and they don't want to touch it and change it. So there's inconsistency. They have their own thing. Somebody else has their own thing. So these things, I want the customers say, I want my on-prem skills to work on the cloud. I want this technology stack to work there. So they really want to meet somewhere in between where they are and where they should be. Whereas we tell them this is what you should do, and that's it. So it's one of those challenges that they're facing. The regulations, they maybe have this regulation that maybe the database was not supposed to live the on-prem because of some regulations. A good example would be the healthcare, right? So they just can't do it. It's just the data sovereignty. Maybe they're a government. They can't just move things to cloud, and And it doesn't even make sense sometimes. Like sometimes you have solutions, and I always been a fan of what do you should do what makes sense. So for example, if you're a store, let's say just a tiny store, and you register people who walk in, if your system would be all on cloud and the internet goes out, then people walk in, you can't put their information in. That doesn't even make sense. Why shouldn't you? You should be able to, whatever that is concerning for that particular place. Let's say you have an intranet site that only people in that building is accessing, but then they force you to ship the thing to the cloud and then do the backup in the cloud. It's going back and forth, a lot of cost for something that doesn't make sense. But if you do that, bring that in, then you have other problems like security problems, like compliance, all the other things. So this is all the challenges that kind of gets in an interesting place. The latency is the other challenge. And when you have a diverse set of infrastructure, you have the problem with the internet latency. So that's the thing that I was saying, that sometimes it doesn't even make sense to go this round trip all the way into the data center to do certain things, right? And the other way around, there may be like some legacy apps that you want to, okay, I'll have a legacy app. I want to be able to adopt the cloud model for this legacy app that I'm running, but I don't want to it doesn't work. I want to keep it where they are, but I want to adapt these new model, like cloud model. So these are some interesting things that the customer really wants, but it's the challenge that they have today. That's where the Azure Arc comes into play. So yes, sir.
I can't read your slide very well online. Can you change it? Pick a different layout. It's a little
Oh.
small. We can see it fine here in the room, but
That's interesting. Where did it go?
pick like an overlay or
Okay.
Try that one. Yeah, you're blocking it a little bit. So, try that.
Well, you want to like remove my picture and make it the full screen?
Yeah, I might need to from
Okay.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay.
That's good. That's good.
Sure.
Thank you.
No problem. I mean, I move around anyways, so.
That's fine. There we go.
Yeah.
Sorry to break
No,
your
that's
slide.
okay. That's okay. That's okay. It's just we're learning too. This is the first time I'm doing this overlay thing. Okay, so yeah, that's where the Azure Arc come into play. So you have infrastructure that you want to manage. You have some data services or some applications that you want to manage, but then
I think you're muted.
am I? Apologies. No, it's working. Looks like it's working. Should.
Good. Now you're not muted.
Okay.
Okay. Now you're not muted.
Okay. All right.
As you were. Sorry.
No, that's all right. That's all right. So now that we talked about why and why do we have to do this and what are those challenges, let's see what Azure Arc brings to the table. So we have infrastructure, we have the Arc enabled data services. So we're going to talk about all of that today. Any questions so far? Okay, so let's take a look at what Azure does for Azure resources. Okay, so for Azure resources, we have a set of tools and features that Azure brings to you to make it easier to deploy your application, and there's the set of tools and experiences that it offers. So we have customers that using these tools and experiences, things that, for example, Azure CLIs brings to the table, or all these different Azure features like Azure AD for example, for your authentication authorization, the security part, the monitoring part, the Azure Monitor analytics, log analytics, protection. So they have Defender and Sentinel, automation, and development using these tools like Azure DevOps or GitHub to bring your application in. And And on the control side, we have inventory, organization, and governance using things like Azure Policy, things like, the single pane of glass that managing your solution, and the extensibility for other things that might be there. But then the resources and facilities, they all, you got Azure region, and the resources are the ones that Azure offers to you within the Azure data centers. But what if you have something that is outside of Azure? So that's where the Azure Arc enabled services and infrastructure come to play. So now we're talking about not just Microsoft facilities, we talk about your facilities like on-prem or even multi-cloud. You may have things on AWS or GCP or your on-prem data center or on edge, right? So and each one of them has a specific set of challenges. For example, the things that you have on edge may have a set of vulnerability that the solutions that are on AWS doesn't have, or the things that are running on your data center may have a set of there's different needs for management than the edge devices, for example, that you have. So each one of them has very specific set of challenges, both from the management side and security side and the policy. But you want to be able to manage all that, consistently across. So Azure Arc is essentially using those extensions to set out and bring these controls and brings all the tools that you have know and love with using the Azure, like the DevOps tools and all those stuff with the CLI and everything else, and brings it to any infrastructure running anywhere, including a data center, including multi-cloud, including edge, which sounds amazing. And it is amazing. So what does the Azure Arc do? So essentially, Azure Arc brings the services and management to any infrastructure. If you're familiar with ARM, Azure Resource Manager, so you can now do that outside of the Azure on any infrastructure. So the first pillar is the organization and governance of across environments. So things like servers, like Kubernetes clusters, that you have across the cloud providers or on your prem. They can be onboarded. There's a term called onboarding, and this onboarding essentially gives you all of these extra options and policy management. The second part is the application management. So you can have at scale application management using the Kubernetes, Arc-enabled Kubernetes clusters. Deploy and manage Kubernetes application across environments using cool technologies like GitOps, for example. And GitOps is something that you might have not heard, but it's going to be the next big thing. It's essentially as a extension to DevOps plus the infrastructure as code plus some other things that is very, very fine-tuned for, like, especially for Kubernetes based deployments. And the last but not least is your data, which is what you care the most, that you can run it anywhere at confidence. So this data, what if you can just deploy and manage data services at scale with confidence? So the architecture of Azure Arc is as follows. You got the Microsoft Azure. You got the management interfaces like the portal, the CLI, Azure SDK. You got the Azure Resource Manager that does many things for you, including the identity, the role-based access control, policy management, indexing, and group, resource group, etc. And on the other hand, we've got the customer locations. Like it could be on-prem, it could be on other cloud providers, doesn't matter. What then you would do is that you would use the appropriate extensions to onboard those services as server and infrastructure or services to Azure, and then use the management functionality that it brings, the ARM brings for you to those as well. So starting from the bottom, actually, me highlight it here. So starting from the bottom, you got servers, right? So servers, you got like a Windows server, you got the popular Linux distros. It's pretty much support all of the Windows servers since 2012 R2. Pretty much all of the ones that are supported, that are in support is included. And most popular Linux distros for server. And then the next one is the Arc Kubernetes agent for Arc Kubernetes cluster. So the Arc Kubernetes cluster can bring any Kubernetes cluster to Azure, including the ones that it's not even. It could be like your desktop Kubernetes cluster that you have like a Minikube or something that you can bring it to the Azure. And what it does, there is an Arc Kubernetes resource provider, and there's agents that is installed. There's an extension that installed to a custom namespace called Azure Arc, and it will essentially make the magic, do the magic. And sits on top of that Kubernetes cluster is the Arc data services. So Arc data services are like SQL managed instances and Postgres Hyperscale. There's also new features coming in, such as Azure App Services. If you're familiar with the app services and Azure Functions, all that, that's also coming. Again, all of that, the courtesy of the Kubernetes cluster, because that's the way you can manage these extra stuff. Without that, you wouldn't be able to achieve that.
Yes, sir. I don't think they can hear you very well online.
Yeah.
Be in front of the mic on your lap.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Any questions on this picture, the architecture picture?
I've not seen this before. Is this new to everybody? I'm just curious. Something new.
All of the,
You've seen it, Hank?
no, it's new. Yeah, all of the layouts, so like the last screen too. I've never seen them kind of drawn out. I mean, I've got a bunch of detailed questions. I suspect we'll get more.
We will get to the Q&A, I guess. Like, yeah, I certainly don't have all the answers for you because these technologies are so new, but it's pretty cool. I'm learning too, just such as yourself. But
well, I guess just on this one.
Yeah.
So for the things that are approaching Azure PaaS, that I guess are coming soon, app services, for instance. Does that mean that if you wanted to leverage, say, something that felt like an app service,
right,
in your own data center,
correct,
that you would first deploy a Kubernetes cluster,
correct,
and it would be managed by the Arc
correct.
data controller.
You'll be correct. Yes.
And so you don't have to worry, but you can spend your time focused on the Azure app service.
Correct. Exactly. That's exactly the point. Thank you. That's you made the point. That's exactly right. So that's the whole point. So you focus on the thing, but then the catch is this. So if you choose to do this, you are responsible for anything because that's what you chose. You chose to host this app services on-prem. So if there's something happened to your hardware, it's like, the building's on fire, that you would lose access to those services. But then that's your choice. So that's all about the choice. That's the thing about the Azure Arc. It gives you the choice to either go with the cloud, which is like, scalable, like, have low latency. There's like, the SLA. But then if you choose to take it, then there is the only thing that it gives you is the security, the management, and just like you said, all that, the same development experience that you would and love, with the option that you have now, which is now you can run it in anywhere. right? That's exactly right. That's exactly the point. Yes.
Is this in something like GCC High? Can you use it in that yet?
GCC High.
The government version of Azure?
Oh yeah, I'm not sure. It probably is not. The government usually is behind, but it would be interesting if because that would be something that they would be interested in. I'm pretty sure. I'm not sure about that.
Okay.
I can't say what I don't know. Yes.
Talked about being able to manage resources.
Yes.
Other major cloud.
Yes. So AWS, Google Cloud, and IBM is supported right now.
Well, and also Adam's House in Katy. You might not have heard of that one, right?
Yeah. Also Rancher too.
Yeah, and Adam's House in Katy.
I don't know if they consider a cloud provider.
My point there being that it doesn't have to be a cloud provider any. So the actual answer to your question, Hank, is whatever you've got there. Your house doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
It's also interesting to point out this because the other cloud providers have similar offerings. So, for example, Google has Anthos, AWS has Outpost. But if you look it up, they all have like certain restrictions on something. I think it's the more. Again, I can't say something that I don't know. I know about the Azure Arc. I don't know about the Outpost, but from what I read and what I heard is that this is probably the more liberal approach that Microsoft took. That you're in charge of what you should do as opposed to, like, for example, AWS dictates you what hardware you should buy or what you should do. Like you don't have that restriction here.
In a VMware system, like data center, does the Arc agent have to be installed into every server, or can it interact somehow directly with like vSphere?
Did you say VMware?
Yeah,
We will get to that.
Oh, okay.
We haven't got to that point yet. We will get to that. Yes. Oh yeah, so that stuff is not part of this. So the thing that is important. That's a good question. So it's important to see and to know what is part of this. So the thing that is part of it is identity management. Like, let's say you want to have like role-based access control. Anything that is ARM, right, related to the ARM, if you're familiar with the Azure Resource Manager. So role-based access control policies, monitoring, by the way, that's not part of ARM, but this monitoring is a big part of it. We will get to that on both servers and on Kubernetes. The monitoring is part of that. This management is part of that too. So you can manage those things, but it's not, the networking is not part of that. That's on you because it's in your infrastructure. You are in total control of that. Microsoft doesn't tell you anything about the networking. You should be. The only thing it tells you is that I need this port open. And when we get to the data services, and we will get to that, there is even a disconnected mode. So you can actually use it in disconnected mode, which is helpful for, I guess, at any point maybe in the future, if they have it for government, maybe that's what they're interested in, because you don't want to be connected all the time, but you want to also be able to use that. But they have a very interesting approach on that one too. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions on this screen? We'll get to all of this in the future slides. So let's talk about the infrastructure now. The infrastructure part, we got the Arc-enabled server. We just talked about it. So it supports many of the popular distros, including the AWS, Linux, the Red Hat. I believe they have Oracle, ASUS, Ubuntu. All of the Windows servers that are supported is there. We'll talk about the management, all the capabilities. The next part is the Arc-enabled SQL Server, which is not to be confused with the Arc-enabled data server. So that's something else. This is just for SQL Server, something specific for SQL Server. It's pretty much an extension of the first one, which is the Arc-enabled server that is extending it to SQL. It just gives it a little bit more features for that. So there's organization, the governance, security, and all that. all of these are now available. They're not in preview anymore. All of these services are GA. Arc-enabled Kubernetes is the one. Google Anthos, for example, they focus on the Kubernetes. So everything is there as a Kubernetes. So Microsoft has a very similar approach on that for the data services, but also Microsoft has the servers. It's more like a combination of both that it does. AWS mostly focus on the server rather than Kubernetes, but Google Anthos focus on the Kubernetes. But for the Kubernetes, as you can see, it does support OpenShift, Azure Stack HCI, does support any other cloud provider like GKE, Elastic Kubernetes, and literally any Kubernetes cluster, including that Rancher and all that.
Yeah, Adam House and Katie has one on a Raspberry Pi.
Yeah, that's what I had also. I was gonna bring it.
3 Raspberry Pis.
It's a K3S.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
K3S. Yeah, I had it. It's just the recent move that I had, I lost it. So it's not lost. It's probably somewhere in one of those boxes. But you can build a cluster, the Kubernetes cluster on the Raspberry Pi. It's like a cool enclosing. They call it cloudlet. So you can like attach like a tiny network cable to like a more like a router, not like a switch.
Okay.
And they can connect them together, and you have one or two as like a master node, and the other one's a worker nodes, and
Okay. Yeah,
create a mini Kubernetes cluster.
Yeah.
It's
Cool as we'll get at.
yeah. Oh, those are cool.
Oh, the teeny little ones.
It's such a shame you can't buy Raspberry Pi anymore. I was like, just looking at it yesterday, I was like, you literally can't buy it. It's like it's out of stock everywhere.
Oh. Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't know that was everywhere.
I'm pretty sure you can buy it for like 10 times the price somewhere, but I don't want to pay that much. Yeah. Yes. I think it's just chip shortages that affects that. Okay, so this is the infrastructure, right? So this is an example how it's going to look like. So if you got like virtual machines, it can literally sit next to it the Azure Arc machines in the same resource group. So that's the only thing you need is you need the resource group to onboard. They call it onboarding. It's absolutely free, by the way. They don't charge you for this process. The only thing they charge you for is the services that you attach to it, like just like as if you have a VM. So the like for example that you can bring these machines, and when you do that, now you can do cool things like policy management. This policy management now say, okay, now I have already some policies on some of the machines that I have here. Would it be cool that I can apply these policies to everywhere, like all the on-prem stuff as well? That's what you get. So that's the policy management. We also have automation account. So with the automation account, you can do a lot of things like the upgrades, patching, every custom script, whatever you name it.
Charge for VM for like say in an on-prem data center,
No,
so you can mention Arc.
no.
Oh, okay.
It's no charge, free of charge, no charge. The only thing you get charged for it is whatever services that you use addition to onboard it.
Okay.
Yeah, you don't get charged for things that you own. That would be ridiculous. So yeah, I don't know anything about the pricing or anything. It's just, but the thing that is, it's just that it doesn't charge you for onboarding process. They call it onboarding process. So let's talk about the Arc-enabled server. So let's talk about the reach. So the reach is there's Linux. There's many popular distros are supported. There's Windows, pretty much all of the ones that are supported, VMs and actual machines, by the way, bare metal supported, domain agnostic. So you can organize the inventory at scale, searchable inventory. You can, by the way, you can onboard single or many machines at the same time with the script that it generates for you. I'm going to show it to you briefly. It out of the box, you get the governance and security. So the built-in Azure policies, like I said, all of this stuff from Azure, from the ARM, Azure Resource Manager, you get it for free. The security baseline, compliance management, so across all of the environments. So, and also the security features would be the Defender. So now Microsoft has this, they consolidate all their security offerings into two general category. There's a Defender, and they have like Defender for cloud. I'm not a big fan of the name, but it's just that they wanted to consolidate all that. So the Defender is what you know as a classic security protection, and then we got Sentinel. The Sentinel is more like advanced threat protection. There's this more like machine learning stuff to it. So this it's a little bit more advanced stuff. So that's more like a proactive thing rather than reactive. And then role-based operation. So these are some of the additional services you get when you onboard these machines. Policy, Defender, Sentinel, like I said, Azure Monitor, you get it for free. So that's, well, when I say free, it's like, I think I'm not sure on that one because there's certain tiers that you get for free, but you can get it. That's the thing. I know that they charge you a flat fee for the change in inventory tracking. I'm not sure how much that is, but that's just for the update management. But there's also Security Center. So this is more in going to the IT realm. I'm on the developer side, but if you're on IT, you know a thing or two about the Microsoft Configuration Endpoint Manager, which is formerly SCCM. So this is the future of that. It's more like a vNext, the next generation. It's a future of SCCM and Endpoint Configuration Manager, if you're familiar with those stuff. So it doesn't have all those features yet, but it will be a successor to that at some point. Even right now, as you can see, it matches most of the what Microsoft Endpoint Configuration Manager does and more. So for example, for a Microsoft Endpoint Configuration Manager, it was something that would be mostly for Windows. This is platform agnostic, right? This is using Windows and Linux. Because of that, we got software updates on Linux machine anywhere. So that's a cool feature. So even your on-prem, you can manage all the software updates from the single pane of glass. And this is all brought by the agent that is installed on behalf of Azure and onto those VMs. It's specifically called Log Analytics Agent. But for example, if you have a domain controller, like a Windows server, again, it goes to the realm of IT. So those, with the Endpoint Configuration Manager, you can update the clients that are domain joined, but you can't do that with the Arc enabled servers. Pretty much the rest of it, as you can see, is on par, and it does it differently. So for example, the Endpoint Configuration Manager use the proxies for the on-prem system, which are behind the internet gateway. But for Arc enabled server, we use Log Analytics Gateway. So it does it differently. And for example, for the create, manage, deploy application on machines, there is a GUI, graphical user interface for the Endpoint Configuration Manager, where you don't have the graphical user interface for the Arc enabled, but it does the same thing. The OS upgrades also was Endpoint Configuration Manager. Was supporting the Windows OS only, by the way. Upgrades, so let's say you want to upgrade it from one version to another version, that's not supported currently with the Arc enabled. So let's talk briefly about the Arc enabled SQL Server. Like I said, it's more like an extension of Azure Arc enabled servers. So there's a flexibility, management, and governance security bring bring to your SQL Server. So if you onboard the servers that those SQL servers running on to Azure Arc, it's just a matter of like just adding those SQL Server to that. It's very easy. You don't have to upgrade your SQL Server or install an extension or pay for anything else. It just happens automatically. If you don't onboard the server, still very easy process, very similar to the onboarding server, but you get lots of stuff. You get the like I said, the RBAC, like you can get the RBAC all the way from the Azure down to your on-prem server, which is already if it's domain joined, if it's like there's a sync on, can be there already. But then there's log analytics piece, which is very, very valuable. There's security center that you can bring some of the feature that, like for example, Azure SQL has for data for the security. Yes.
So, but this happens at the server level.
Yes.
With the existing install. There's
Yes.
No data migration.
Yes. Nothing.
You turn it on.
Yes.
So how does managed SQL handle like breaking updates?
It's not managed SQL, by the way. There's a thing called managed SQL. That's in the data services. This is just normal SQL Server on-prem.
Okay.
It's not managed SQL.
So it's not-
There's a managed SQL. That's something else. We will talk about it. We'll get to that.
Okay.
It's two different things. This is just a good old
It's a
SQL
regular
Server on-prem, right?
So it's never gonna do it. It's never gonna update.
Correct. This is just an extension that it installs on the machine, and there's a component that is added to the SQL Server. You don't have to upgrade or anything. You don't have to transform your data. It just applies that. It start giving you recommendation about how things are, just like you would have on Azure SQL. But now you don't have to bring everything to the Azure SQL. You can just keep it where it is. It works the same way as it was. It just brings those goodness to it. And in addition, it brings those Azure Sentinel, which I was just talking about, the advanced threat protection, the vulnerability assessment. These are the things that you want to get informed about, right? Like, for example, there's compliances. Maybe you have to have some compliances. That's a big problem, and like I see a lot of people struggling with, especially those who are coming from those old systems. So this is how it's going to look like. Again, it looks like it's a normal SQL. You can just go and manage things. You can add policies and stuff. So that again is in the courtesy of the agents it has on the server. All of that brings like a seamless experience. Yes.
Stupid question, but
No. There's no stupid question.
like if I'm in the Azure portal and
Yeah.
I want to go to this, is there now going to be something that says, like SQL servers and then another one that says SQL servers -arc? Or are they?
Oh, I'll show it to you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'll show it to you. I don't have it now, but I can show it to you how it's going to look like. And this is going to give you like something like this, for example, the assessment, security analysis, business continuity, performance, scalability. So it gives you like a kind of like a report like this. It's cool that you have like all these features just by enabling that for free. So yeah, it is a lot of stuff that it does for you. So let's talk about the Arc-enabled Kubernetes. So now let's shift gears from the servers to Arc-enabled Kubernetes, because this is also the foundation for all the data services and app services that coming. There's data services, some of them are in preview still, and app services is completely in preview. But I believe they're going to be announcing somewhere like maybe like a build. I don't know. Don't count my word. I mean, I wouldn't know anyways if I'm just guessing. So the Arc-enabled Kubernetes is now available. I think it was in preview up until like earlier this year. So this is pretty new stuff, right? It's just became GA like few months ago, like a couple months ago maybe. So what does it bring to the table? The connection, the support for multiple flavors, deployed to existing cluster, open source, ecosystem friendly. When I say open source system friendly, that, like, for example, the monitoring, right? It doesn't force you to use like Azure Monitor or anything like that. You actually use Kibana and Prometheus and all those open source stuff that everybody else is using. So that's why I'm saying it's open source friendly. Configure. So the configure using GitOps toolkit that it has. I hope I can show you that GitOps demo that wasn't working earlier that I was testing, but the configuration with the GitOps portion of it is still in preview. But what GitOps does here for you is that, let's say you have many clusters. Let's say you've got like the Raspberry Pi's example that I gave you. Let's say you have like, I don't know, hundreds of those Raspberry Pi clusters, right? And then you want to find a way to manage them all. Like let's say that they deploy a solution. One way would be that to build a pipeline that connects to every single one of them and push the things there. But then you have to manage a lot of things, and there's a lot of things that you have to do. The other way would be using GitOps. And GitOps, like I said, is going to be the future of DevOps. The thing about the GitOps is that your credentials never leaves the where it will be deployed. So for example, if you have a source code that has infrastructure code in it, and in Kubernetes example, it would be the Kubernetes is your infrastructure. Like it has all the things that you need, the services, right? Load balancer, everything is inside the cluster, but then you want to deploy maybe something to it. Let's say you want to deploy a multi-tier application to it. There's even volumes, right? There is so many things that you can have in Kubernetes cluster. But then, would it be nice if it would have done, like, for example, you check in your code to the source control, and it would just pull that information without running any pipeline. That's what the GitOps is. So to GitOps, there's different flavors. Microsoft specifically using the Flux CD. So the Flux CD is also created by the folks who created the GitOps, the ViveWorks. I think they are based in UK as well. So it's amazing what they did. So they have this thing called the Flux Toolkit that you can add the source code provider. That could be Git. It technically could work with other TFBC or SVN, but people use Git these days, so it's just pretty much using Git. You can have the Helm controller, for example, if you use Helm for deploying things to Kubernetes. It can also fix things for you. Let's say somebody have access to the cluster and they change things. It will go ahead and detects that from the source control, the source of truth they call it, and then fixes whatever that's happened, right? Or you can also use this as a tool for automated deployments. Let's say somebody makes some changes. There's pushing it to a specific branch. You can actually have it to go to the path for the branch and then deploy it automatically from there. It even supports the two-way notification system for CI/CD systems. If let's say you have other things that you use, Terraform, for example, to deploy, it works with that too. So there's a lot of things that GitOps. So it's also something new that's it's in progress. But that's what is supported for the configuration of these cool deployments. And the example that I showed you, like I gave you example earlier, was that you have, like, let's say hundreds of these cluster. Maybe you got like drone deployments for they can get the over-the-air software update with just a push or a pull request merge. So wouldn't be cool to that happen. That's what the GitOps does. So operate and monitor. So again, this does have the Azure Monitor integration, but again, it also gives you option for those open source integrations as well. and they govern and secure, similar to what you saw with the server. It does support any infrastructure and any Kubernetes, whether it's GKE, EKS, VMware, OpenShift, you name it, Rancher, all of that is supported. In fact, I'm going to show you even like the one that in the demo, I'm going to show you like my own cluster. I'm using Kind, like as a maybe using on the laptop, and I'm going to onboard it to the Kubernetes.
I got a customer who their use case is they have Kubernetes, but they're on there and they have to be on-prem, or at least partly on-prem, because they're on-prem is actually ships. They have small data centers on big ships, and they have Kubernetes clusters running in these small data centers in their big ships, and they have big ships. And so their use case, well, they're going to stay there, right? They're all internet connected, of course, but that's where they need their small data centers on their big ships. And they have this exact use case they want to there and enabling. Well, they run Kubernetes. I'm not sure if it's even VMware. I think it might be bare metal. I have to actually ask them. I really don't know. But they've got basic bare Kubernetes running on that. This is a great use case for them because they also have AKS as well in Azure, and so they want to be able to see all of their on-prem and their Azure stuff in one place.
That's a good point that you brought. Like, this is one of those use cases that GitOps can help you with that. So if let's say you got an AKS, maybe you got another cluster somewhere else, and you got that one in your ship, and then you want to apply the same version everywhere. So one way would be just to write this different pipelines to push these things. But then the problem with those pipelines is that, first of all, you have to have the security. The security is going to be like automatically there's a problem because now you have to somehow connect to those clusters. I know in the software development, like years ago, they told us, oh, don't use the pull model, use the push model. That's the better way. But this case, this is the other way around, because now the pull model it doesn't know where is a new version. So you have to tell it, you have to do it periodically, like every 5 minutes, every 10 seconds. Depends on your workload, of course. Like maybe you don't need to update it that often, or maybe you do. So you can change that. And maybe there's a problem with this pulling. If every time you're pulling, so there is a controller in your cluster that its job is called flux controller, by the way, in terms of flux. It pulls at certain intervals. Say maybe there is some image in the Docker, or maybe there's a Helm controller. There's a new version. It does support semantic version. Let's say if there's a new patch version, get it. But if there's a new major version, don't get it. Let me tell you if you want to. I'll let you know if this is an update. So you can do all that neat things. So for patches, you can get it. For like minor version, you can get it. For example, it's up to you how you configure it. There's also like Flux v2 that supports multiple cluster and multiple sources and multiple deployments at the same time for the same cluster. So when you do that, all of those management, it would be inside the cluster, and the credentials never get leaked. And not only that, the credentials of the source codes will not be leaked also, because they are in the secret in the cluster. So that cluster is obviously up to you how to manage the secret. But in Azure, you can use the key vault. Like AWS, I'm sure they have their own way to protect the, secrets. Yes. Yes. Canvas.
What they're doing is going with EKS.
That's like a Kubernetes service.
Yeah, but we're using for infrastructures plus EKS, GKE, AKS. So, you write that as YAML, put that into Flux as you mentioned. That then deploys it.
Yeah.
That's its infrastructure. application services data.
Yeah,
And in fact, Microsoft is
it is the same thing here as well. Yep. That's pretty much the same thing it does here. We'll get to those data and
yeah.
very, very similar. Again, this is going to be similar to what you saw earlier when you onboard them. I don't know if it's going to look exactly like this. This slide could be old, but it looks like as if this is a AKS cluster. In fact, it gives it the ID and the unique ID similar to what it gives to other resources. So this is one how we can bring these a cluster using the cluster connect. Let's say on the right you get that's the customer firewall. On the left there's like Microsoft Azure. So you got the Azure AD. So you log in and you have like the right tool or right access to certain resource group, and you do this onboarding experience. And the onboarding experience, of course, you need some sort of RBAC access and service account and Kubernetes side as well. That's how they do the handshake. So then there's more service accounts that's created that do other things inside the Kubernetes, including creating things in there, like creating pods, creating namespaces, the things that it does. It will be seamless, and it will talk to the API server just like the Helm does, and it operates the same way. So these configurations are, like I said, the operator is Flux, and there's a namespace called Flux-system that's created. You can use Flux. That's actually, in fact, I'm using Flux CLI because the stuff that Microsoft has is based on the Flux, but it's on some preview if you're using the Azure CLI. You can use Flux to do exactly the same thing. It doesn't matter. But the point of that is you have now that option to control this. And it brings you all the policy and security and extra goodness there. So we talked about the GitOps definitions and principle. So the principle of that is like Git. So the GitOps names is like Git is the source of the truth, or source of the truth for both infrastructure and for your code. Is a single place where we operate to change and create and delete. That also, by the way, takes a lot of things away from the management. Let's say you have a team of 12 people. They work on a source code. They happen to also have maybe the same code or another code base, the infrastructure definition. Maybe some of them have access to that. They can change things, and depends on how you do it. If you do it correctly, there should be a process for it, to review, like a pull request. Maybe at least some people review it, and then when they check it in, it automatically gets applied to your cluster, right? So if someone leaves, the only thing you have to do is to just revoke their access from the source code. That's the only thing you should do, because nobody else have access to, or at least the people that are working there, nobody else do things directly to the Kubernetes. Flux does. And where does the Flux have their credentials? In the cluster. So that's why I'm saying this is better if you do this pull mechanism instead of push. Right. And then this one, by the way, works also for versioning as well. Let's say you got an image. Let's say you got a Docker repository, like a private registry, and let's say you push an image, right? So what you should do? What you should do is that when you push this image, then you got to have another process to edit the image tag to make it to the latest one, and then do kubectl apply to apply that thing to the Kubernetes. GitOps does that for you as well. So on your behalf, it listens to the registry, the Docker registry. Whenever it says a new image, it goes and updates your source code and change that version on your behalf and applies it to the cluster. So it does a lot of things for you.
Is
Yes.
GitOps, is this going to replace
ADO.
ADO, like Azure DevOps. So ADO is a product. So DevOps is a way, like
No,
the
the GitOps,
You mean GitHub?
GitHub, you mean?
well, no, we're saying GitOps. It's
So
not a
GitOps is a thing, like DevOps, right?
Oh,
Is
okay.
is a process.
Okay.
It's not the
I
product.
didn't-
Azure DevOps is a
Yeah.
product.
But that is my question.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Since you touched on it.
Don't ask a question I can't answer.
Stop, Sean.
So is Microsoft's position that GitOps is going to supply Azure DevOps?
Are you talking about GitHub now? Because
GitHub.
Well, he's asking a really good question.
Because we were really.
Are we talking about GitHub or GitOps? Because GitOps is like DevOps. It's actually an evolution of DevOps.
Yes.
You meant GitHub. So I don't know. I'm think yes, but don't.
Actually, I asked this question. On the DevOps side.
Yeah.
And he was like, if it's starting now, if you have actions.
Yeah.
If you're already on ADO, it's not going well. That's going well.
Okay.
What about that one?
Which
That's
one?
the third one.
GitOps.
Well, GitOps is the process. Let me
Yes, no,
demystify
I
this because I guess there's a confusion here.
That's
So-
not lucky, by the way.
So you guys are familiar with DevOps process? Are you guys all familiar with the DevOps process?
Yeah.
You're familiar with the DevOps process? So the DevOps is the principle that is essentially the foundation of it goes back to the Agile, right? GitOps is more like an extension to it. It's like okay, DevOps is good and all, but it doesn't tell you what to do. It doesn't have a lots of like fine details. It's just like a set of principles, just like in Agile. Agile was like it's a manifest, like it was like basically like a the
Stop planning.
right.
So is it like applying a methodology to the way like DevOps works?
Correct. It is based on the foundation of the DevOps. It uses the same exact thing. The principle is the same.
Just like more opinion.
It's more opinionated and it does emphasize on infrastructure as code. So it's saying that, okay, you should really think about not like having the IT admin go ahead and run a bunch of commands and leave, right? Everything should be checked into the source control, right? Which is what allows you to have like infrastructures that are can be recreated from the scratch, can be disposable. So then we are moving towards my colleague he has a very fun way of saying it. He said like don't treat your infrastructure like a pet, because if it's a pet, then you become worried about it. You care for it, and you when something happens to you, you become sad and depressed. It treat it like a cattle, I mean cattle is probably not that good words for vegetarians, like crops, right? Right. So like crops. Treat it like yeah. So they are commodity. You can replace it. You can kill your Kubernetes cluster and create a new one. But then how do you create a new one? Then you have to call that guy coming in doing it for you, or if you have an infrastructure that there's a representation of that. Only thing you need is your source code, and the source code is never going to go away, right? Doesn't matter if it's on ADO or GitHub or anywhere. It doesn't really matter. I know that a lot of people are fixated on the thing. Oh, is it GitHub or is it going to be like nobody cares. I mean, I don't care. I like GitHub better, to be honest, but I don't really care which one's going to be success. I think GitHub will be successful,
Yeah,
definitely
GitHub
because of the
will be good.
popularity.
Yeah. One of the things that we have experience, we're using GitOps, we're using for practical.
Right.
And normally we, as developers, we run the code, and then somebody else will do the build and push it into production. Now we're moving left, if you look at that.
Exactly. That's a very good analogy. Exactly, that's what's happening. The role of developers now is more than just developers. They actually do a lot more, and this is good because it helps you move faster. So if you have like a team of like 10 developers, or like I should say like multiple teams of like multiple developers, so some of the teams move faster than the other teams. Why should it wait for other teams to do their thing? They can just move independently. And with this whole new set of tools that we have, they can move independently because they can check in their code. And once they do, if everything's rightly set up, their thing's going to be packaged and it goes to the right place. And maybe it's update a feature or widget. Like Amazon.com, for example, I've heard they have like on their homepage, they have like 50,000 microservices. So I don't know what, maybe, but most of them are like analytics. But that's a good thing, because if one of them stops working, the page doesn't break, right? They don't have to wait for the other ones. I think that's the thing. That's the whole point.
Just to drill in on this GitOps concept a little bit.
Yes.
Because
Don't confuse it with GitHub. GitHub is a product. GitOps is a feature.
Is opinionated DevOps.
It is. Exactly. It's an evolution of DevOps, in my opinion, but it focuses more on the tools and technologies rather than just big statements like the, yeah.
It just hasn't really penetrated,
It's new.
like
It's very brand new.
Oh, okay.
It literally the DB works. If you look up GitOps, there's a GitOps.tech site. It's literally was born in like 2007 or something like that.
GitOps in 2007?
Or it could be, I could be wrong. So 2007, I could be wrong on that. It's only,
Never heard of this term.
you know what? It's 2017, I think, maybe not so. Right.
Next generation.
Based on this kind of this.
Correct.
Flux is an implementation.
Yeah, Flux is one product, by the way. There are other ones. There's Argo CD. At some point they wanted to merge, but like I said, Flux is more popular because it has more features and more tools, and they are the same people, by the way, who introduced this concept of GitOps. I can show you some of the things. I think we are kind of like sidetracked. We are a little bit sidetracked here, but I will show you the demo. I will show you the site, and I will show you the GitOps and Flux CD. They have a really good documentation if you want to read up. It's a learning curve. It's not something trivial. It's one of those things that you have to think about it. It kind of settles in. It's not something trivial like yeah, this is a coffee should have a lid, right? It's not like that. It's not a trivial.
Yeah, one other thing I noticed that's different as I was learning about it is that it's a pull model, whereas
Yes.
GitHub Actions and Azure,
Right.
and Azure DevOps build and push to wherever
Yes.
they're going. GitOps pulls.
Well, that's what it got me first. Like when I started, I had a love and hate relationship with this because when I started, like isn't that counterintuitive when you make it, because we learned in computer science that everything should be push model, because then whenever there's an event, there should be an action, right? Event-based, event-driven development, right? All this cool stuff. But then if you think about it from the perspective of deployment, it's actually better this way. It's like the inversion of control. Like when you have in software, you actually have to do it the other way around. But there's an interesting problem, by the way, happens. If you do this, there's a problem that, okay, now if you're trying too much to pull things, like let's say you're hitting, in fact, it happened for the Docker Hub. So the Docker Hub has a rate that you can try to pull things like a certain rate.
Rate limit.
There's a rate, there's a limit, and then if you hit that, now they have to change this so the GitOps for folks, they actually fixed that by introducing this option to have like, okay, I can give you an option for like saying you want to pull like every minute or every 10 minutes, things like that nature. So it looks like it's a little bit counterintuitive at first, but it is the better way from the perspective of both the management the deployment and pristine, result. Yes.
So I was gonna say that with GitOps, does it still operate with the credentials stored on the host and it doesn't leave?
On the Kubernetes.
Okay.
Yes.
And then second, so is it like would you say that with this pulling mechanism, is it like a modified webhook?
No,
Okay.
it's not like that.
Like
It does support.
change-
So what it does, so there's the, I guess we have sidetracked it a little bit here, but I can show you some of the ways that it can do. There's operators. So in Flux, for example, there are different operators, and each one of these operators are in charge of something. So there's a customized operator with the K. The customized operator is in charge of like getting these YAML files, for example, and it supports obviously the overlay for customize and all that stuff. So that one, it does things differently than the Helm operator, for example. The Helm operator does a different thing. There's a source code operator, and that talks to the source code. So there's different things inside. There's different operator. There's a notification operator, and some of those does work with the webhook, but then not all of them. For example, there's this thing called chat ops. I mean, there's so many ops out there. This chat ops is actually pretty hot these days, and I mean, folks who are in Silicon Valley, they are using this chat ops. What is chat ops? Is that what if you could deploy it with the bots in a Teams, Microsoft Teams? You open Microsoft Teams or Slack, and you just say, okay, deploy, right? Or there's something that pops up, say you want to deploy, does it look good? And say click something on that, and then some people coming in online and they say, does it look good? Does it look good? Yes, that's called chat ops, right? And this chat ops is also supported in this Flux CD operator using that a specific operator that I was telling you.
So Flux itself is like a microservices cluster. It manages clusters.
So
Inception like, right?
it is really a framework if you think about it. It's a framework that lets you do things like useful things for the deployment. Right? It's a framework, really. It's like a toolkit. That's what they call it. It's a toolkit. Yeah. So let's talk about it, because we are sidetracked a little bit, but I will show you. I promise I will show you. I know that you have a lot of questions on this, but we'll come back to it. So the flow looked like this for the GitOps here. So you got maybe GKE, EKS, or Rancher, or any other cluster you have. You got the Arc connected Kubernetes cluster. And by the way, there's a terminology that you should be aware of. If you're working with AKS, they call it managed cluster. If you're working with Arc-enabled Kubernetes, they call it connected cluster. So remember these terminologies if you're using the Azure CLI. Connected cluster is a fancy term of Azure Arc, and managed cluster is what Azure managing it for you. So there's difference there, but you can use the same function, same GitOps techniques for both of them. That's the cool part. So you can maybe point them to the same repository, and then whenever you update things, it updates everywhere. So that's what it's explaining here. So there's GitOps configuration, there's a Flux operator, and then the Helm operator that's part of the Flux toolkit, and it takes the application. Maybe there's a V2, and there's a picking up changes from your Git repository, and there's a configuration changes maybe happen. It also works both ways, by the way. It can look at your repository or your container registry. Whenever it sees there's a new image, it will update your configuration in the Git and apply it to your clusters on your behalf as well. So again, it's going to eliminate the need of the pipeline altogether. So this is another view. I guess I can share this slide deck. It's fine with me.
We'll post the deck.
That's fine.
There's a link on the chat.
Yeah.
That's probably too much of the
So
weeds to go
how much time we have?
Then everyone's still here.
Okay.
So
Okay. Good.
when they start leaving, then you
Okay.
follow
Okay.
Pretty late.
Or when the cleaning crews get here, in which case,
Okay.
then we need to go.
That's funny.
They are here? Okay.
Okay. Okay, good. So this is actually kind of like the last topic I have, and then after that we're gonna go to the demos and all that. So let's talk about the Arc enabled data services. So this is a different topic than Azure Arc SQL Server. So those are different things. This thing sits on top of the AKS. I shouldn't say AKS, Arc enabled Kubernetes, right? So how does it work? So let's say you want to have this database, like either it supports the Azure managed SQL managed instances, the thing that you mentioned, and or Azure database for Postgres for Hyperscale mode, which is in preview right now. If you want to deploy those into your own infrastructure, not Azure's, like let's say you want to have, I don't know, Raspberry Pi cluster that I was like telling about, and you want to, you know, deploy some sort of managed SQL or Postgres there, right? How does it happen? So Azure Arc enabled data services makes this happen. There's two modes. There's a connected mode and there's a disconnected mode. Maybe there's no connection, or maybe spotty connection or intermittent connection. So it supports both of those modes. It's always current. So what happens is that it uses the connected cluster, AKS Arc enabled Kubernetes, to deploy these things for you. So essentially, you have to have the Kubernetes of your choice. You can have like any distros of Kubernetes, like K2S, for example, right? And it could work on different cloud providers too. You can actually do this on GKE. So that way you can bring the Postgres, Azure Postgres to GKE this way, right? And essentially you have the unified management. You have essentially those databases systems runs inside those cluster for you. So it does everything from creating pods, creating the storage volumes, everything that needs to happen, volume that needs to be created, all the things that it does it for you. Not only that, but it also installed things like Grafana with some customized dashboard just fine-tuned for it, to help you see things in your in the data services that you just deploy.
But in this case, if you had an existing, set of databases in a SQL server and you
Right.
wanted to move to the Arc, managed SQL, you'd have to migrate the data. You can't.
Well, that's a different thing. So that's again, these are all about we're all about the choices. So if you have the SQL server on-prem with that settings, this is not the right solution for you if you want to keep that.
Well, no, not if you
this is if you
wanted to take advantage of some of the like the management features and scaling.
Right.
You couldn't just like attach the existing.
No, that's a different.
It's like a full-on migration.
Right.
On-prem.
If you want to do that, I mean,
Yeah.
that again is all about choices.
Yeah.
If you want to do that, yes, and you're gonna have to, create a new cluster. Right? Maybe you don't even have Kubernetes. You have to create a Kubernetes because that's how it does it. Because of those objects inside Kubernetes, it creates that for you. And Kubernetes is known for being, very, very efficient and relentless on like applying things. So that's how it can manage to be on a high availability side. So this is I guess the architecture of the data Arc enabled data services. Starting from the bottom on the infrastructure. So you got any infrastructure again. You have a choice to have any infrastructure. On top of that, you install any Kubernetes distros. So it's like any infrastructure, any Kubernetes distros, and you got Kubernetes API. So now there's an AZ data CLI extension that you have to install. That AZ CLI extension now talks to that Kubernetes API, and now say you are intending to create this elastic, maybe managed as Postgres on X infrastructure. That infrastructure could be another cloud provider, right? Or this one, and then you want to create that. What it does then, you have the Azure Arc data controller. Things like it does things like the monitoring and logs, and like I said, this emphasizes on open source tools, backups, high availability, provisioning, scaling, patching, updates, Arc integration. That's how you see it in the management portal. It does support the Postgres Hyperscale. That's in preview. But it also does the Azure SQL Managed instances. If you're familiar with Azure SQL Managed instances, it's kind of like a best of both worlds. Like you have like all the features of that the SQL Server offers, but it's also managed instances. And this time now is managed by Microsoft in somewhere else's hardware, which is pretty cool. And then there's future data services. Maybe Synapse Analytics would be the next analytics engine, whatever that comes next. And by the way, they use the same architecture for the app services I was mentioning. It's not in my slide. It's in private preview right now. It's not even in public preview. So the app services brings things like Azure Web Apps, or functions, or logic apps to the on-prem, similar in a similar fashion. It has to be sit on top of a cluster. Any questions on this? So yeah, you would ask maybe like, okay, what's the point here? The point here is that it's giving you the choice to choose any infrastructure. Maybe you have to choose that way because of some limitation you have, because of some policies. Maybe you have
to with a ship.
or with a ship. You have a ship in the ocean.
Yeah.
You have to do it.
So,
It gives you the choice to choose your infrastructure. Then you can add the services that you like. It's essentially, it's like as you go to the clothes shop and say, okay, I want that socks with that shoe with that shirt, but you don't get the suit. You get this jacket with this, pants.
the DR like scenario also seems interesting. When we have clients who've essentially, gone all in on Azure, but they haven't exited their data center contract, it's just sitting there. It could be an active DR environment, even if their primary is in Azure for all sorts of good reasons.
Yeah, that's a use case. Yeah. Yes.
So, like Microsoft Kubernetes service.
Yes. They have Anthos. Yeah.
Yeah, and AWS has extract.
Yes.
But now, if you want to use their services in an application running Azure, then I could go calculation for based stuff.
Right.
Extract for OCR.
Yeah. Even I give you even another approach to think about it. Maybe you caught a good deal with getting one of those cloud providers and say, okay, I really want this Azure service, but I really want this price from this other provider. You can do that
I
too.
had a conversation.
Yeah.
The instances across clouds and deploy workloads on the fly.
Yeah.
So like.
Yeah, I guess this is all about the choices. And to be honest with you, this is just the beginning. I see them going more and more towards this. It's because I was just talking to one of the, I think I was talking to I was talking to you, I think, about like, this is just the start. Because what's happening is that these cloud companies Microsoft, AWS, and they realize that, okay, you can't just tell people what to do. They have these, they want to have these choices, and that's good too. And more and more you see them, okay, they're gonna come to you. So where do you are? So for example, this is like maybe that's because of the pandemic that IoT didn't take off this year, but it was supposed to be big year for IoT this year. Maybe it is going to be in few years, right? Who knows? But what's going to happen is that with the 5G and IoT, there's a lot of these things, and you're gonna freaking manage these things, right? So the way you do it is you're gonna have to go this model if you think about it. So that's the really smart people. They thought about it much smarter than me for sure. They thought about it years before it's gonna happen. So
But on the VM side, because I get on the container side, it looks like it just taps into the container registry and goes to wherever you need to. So
Right.
in theory, all you're dealing with is a networking problem.
right,
Getting to
exactly. Which is now in your hand because that you're managing that.
And so, but on the VM side, you have to deploy the VM to wherever you're gonna then attach the Arc agent. So you can't manage like your VM images centrally, ship them out to the data center and somehow spin them up. You know,
They have to be there.
they have to argue that you.
And then you add the agent.
Yeah, you gotta pick which one. You can't have it both ways like that.
That's exactly what they're doing. You have data centers, your everything in without, and they're basically taking the VMs, but they have hardware and they cluster. Then it gives you that.
Okay, so then you just run everything out of the cluster and set it.
Yes.
Okay.
You containerize everything. I mean, it's cheaper.
Okay.
You have no-
Makes it cheaper.
Because now, single VM, like in some cases, nowadays, we have to eat another VM of the day, 4 hours of the day. It was just sitting there. But we have this, now the PNL is containerized. And then you have a load rate, like in our case, we have nine VMs in a row. Auto scaling. Then we have different containers running in that cluster. PNL comes up around 4 hours, goes away. Then analytics comes up, it will say adjustment. Dedicated VMs.
It's even.
The cluster will auto scale to accommodate whatever it is.
Yes, and we're not running, that's how it works. At that scale, how it works. You're using the same infrastructure as distributed.
Yeah. So that actually goes it's a good segue for this slide. Say you gotta ask your question first, like where will be the SQL DB, for example, if you want, like, let's say you want a SQL deployment. Where do I deploy it? Do I want to manage it? Or do I want Azure to manage it? So it depends on these answers. You go with the Arc-enabled SQL managed instances, or you go all the way with the Microsoft offerings. As you know, there's like 3 offerings. There's a single Azure SQL. There's full instance or Elastic Pool. So I guess this is going to be like a kind of like a decision-making chart or whatever. And the same thing with the Postgres as well. I guess these are some the pros and cons on each approach. If you let Azure manage it, so there's something you get for free. But if you do manage yourself, depends on what you have. There are like different use cases. And you can see where the Arc-enabled databases comes in the center, because it's like a more like a compromise. I wouldn't call it compromise. It's like maybe you have to do it, or at least you get like somewhere in between. So you get the data security features, but the automatic high availability, data recovery, right? Auto patching, backup restore, monitoring, compliance certification. So data sovereignty. So the data sovereignty is the thing that, for example, you may not be able to do it in Azure, right? Because of some data sovereignty or customer control. So I guess this is more like a chart that you can compare it all. So what do we hear from customer? So this is this, I guess, you know, security management, you know, compliance, all this stuff that we talked about. And this is the I guess this is one of those slides that was left over from before. I guess it's the management service revisited. I did the shuffling recently, so it must have been left from.
Demos.
Yes, demos.
Feels like Azure Stack's gonna quickly lose its place in the world.
What, Azure Stack?
Yeah, well, if you keep extending the PaaS services.
Yes.
Anywhere, you know, having a dedicated box for.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, and honestly, I never understood those boxes anyways. Like I was like, because I know like that both Amazon and Azure that offer those. And they're literally like 18-wheeler trucks that they ship the data in, like they literally bring the data and pushing it and taking it out. I never understood that. And when you can do that on-prem, why would you just do this, like sending it back and forth with the truck?
That still doesn't, it's required to have local presence. Search people there.
Right.
They drove it up by person from Dell, they saw it, make cost maintain it. You don't have to worry about it.
Right.
You have that IP, the IP capacity, they're working with their data.
Yeah, the other time, it was like scenarios with limited or no connection where it came up for us, like remote deployments for like oil field services and stuff like that. It's the only time we didn't get the client to go for it, but it was exactly that reason. Every resource they have to send to the body on site is like incredibly expensive.
Talking about Azure Stack or Azure Stack HCI?
Oh yeah, it's two different things. There's Azure Stack and there's Azure Stack HCI.
Well, there's
You-
HCI.
That's true. There's yeah. 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 Yeah.
HCI being connected to Snowing, which Arc is a big part of it.
It is. Right. Right. Yeah, I don't have those slides, but then you can go to the Microsoft Docs and they are part of the Arc's part of it. Yep. Yep.
Arc stuff. That takes away the place of hub.
It does. It really does. And I do really believe this is the future. This is how it should be. Because you know, you can't just force people to do certain things or use certain things. I know that the HCI, for example, they give you a lot of options on the hardware and they can onboard many things, but it's still, you know, just having that, it looks like shady to me. Like, it was like, you know, it's like you kind of deal with this provider and somehow this is like supported and that one's not support. It's not going to be the future. At least it shouldn't be. It should be something like this, that's simple. Like you can just bring anything and it's up to you how you manage it and do it. And it's seamless. You don't have to worry about it. You know.
Frankly, I think the real most important takeaway for me is the pull methodology versus push methodology. IoT is delayed, but it's coming.
Yes.
And
Yes.
push is going to have scaling issues.
Yes. Yes. That's right. That's a good point. Yeah, very, very good point. The IoT is definitely coming. I think it's delayed because of the COVID. I really think I'm with you on that because of the 5G. You know, the 5G is inevitable. And when the 5G is here, the IoT will be here too, because everything's going to be connected. I mean, heck, my refrigerator, I didn't know if it could be connected to internet. I just found out last night. I mean, I don't know what it does, but you see that episode of Silicon Valley? The guy was connecting all the fridge and used them as a. Have you seen Silicon Valley?
Yeah.
That was so funny.
It's funny, it makes sense though, because when you think about, I mean, all these scenarios are really about infrastructure and where that lives. And because it's going to be hosting some kind of compute. And so I guess in some sense, it makes more sense for the host to invite something in than it does for someone to say like, you have a new guest. Like, open the door, we're ready to update you.
Yes.
They get to choose when they're ready to update you.
Yeah. So one thing you can jumpstart, there is actually a site, jumpstart Azure Arc. Let me actually show it to you. So I guess it's a demo time. Well, I don't have much of the interesting demos. Yes. It's not a demo. I don't have much of the like interesting demo. That's
One question here is the ship.
Yeah.
May not have, it is a bit of saying that.
But so,
Okay, so like some of the rigs out there will have very low bandwidth. So then, how, if it's a full, as you mentioned, how do you notify some compute element or meters? How do you notify them to actually full? Because you have mesh connectivity and bandwidth issues.
there's a sync setting, right? That you can actually sync it based on the time, or you can actually have like a complex policy that you can there's a lot of things you can do with the flux, for example. It usually works based on like a time interval.
but they basically do have to poll for changes.
Yes.
On some interval.
Yes, it's like
But you can give it a window, you can give it a range of which it's allowed to try and that kind of thing.
right.
The other option being, right, is if it's able to be notified when. You know, when it's available. But like with ships and stuff like that, this Microsoft's also coming out with something like proverbial, right? It's another example of being able to use satellite on ships going forward to be able to get closer back to the actual data center sooner. So rather than you using a third party to bring the data somewhere and then still have to transverse it to Azure, you can actually use Orbital, which is right next door to the data centers.
No
A
way.
latency to be able to get that in, be able to synchronize your data, so it's a much smaller window. You have to really function with it. You can do that bursting of data down into the Azure primary.
They like launching their own like near orbital satellites, is that what they're calling it?
No, right now
This is just a
Somebody else's satellite.
They're using Azure Arc satellites.
Yeah, so it is kind of like connecting.
But it is kind of like connected, and we're putting the ground base stations right next to our data.
Oh, cool! I didn't know that actually.
Yeah, Azure Orbital.
Yeah, I've got a friend of my team, she's actually.
I heard about the underwater ones that they sell.
Yeah, that was, yeah, that's. Orbital's real.
It's a great experiment, and this was, yeah.
I was always wondering how does it work? It's like the cable goes in it and it's like self-managed under the ocean.
Yeah, a number of problems with that environment.
Well, that's not just this evening. There's things that are, in the future, and there are things that are nearer term.
Watch that region, man, which one pops open. Very steep going around.
Yeah.
It's in the middle of the ocean.
If you want to take a picture of this, I'm gonna share the slide with you. Somehow we find a way to share the slide. But if you want to take a picture, this is a good one.
My curiosity is, so let's take Kubernetes as an example. When it came out, and the reaction that like a developer would want to go and learn how to build apps and do sidecars, learn patterns. So what are the implications of something like Arc? It just makes that easier to deploy places, or is there something more found that we should learn?
It's more than just. So I mentioned about like the security, the policy, all that stuff that inherited from the ARM. So it extends ARM Azure Resource Manager to anywhere like on-prem and stuff. But it's more than that. It's got to be right, because it's not only just the management, inventory management is for like updating and everything. So it's more, and it's going to be. I have a feeling that it's going to be even more and more as time goes by.
Well, that's a good use case for the good. That company has AWS, Azure, Alibaba,
Alibaba.
Yes, this is a global company. And they have OpenShift for all on-prem. It's Kubernetes, right? And right now, your combination.
Not to name the name.
So on OpenShift, the trading organization, we're trying to do is get any container be deployed anywhere in what multiple regions. And the one region could address same container deployed on Azure.
Yeah.
In Europe.
Yeah.
They can only the cloud that's closest to them.
Yeah, that's,
And if it doesn't work for them, they have data sovereignty.
That looks like
Drop this Azure
what
Stack
the
on
future is
there,
gonna look like.
And we push Kubernetes to the Azure Stack. which is cool.
I really believe that, and I really think that in the future, like you have like this thing that you don't doesn't even matter what cloud provider you go, you can deploy anywhere, anything, anywhere.
Add to that cost, right? Where you get the
Right.
price.
It's always the race to the bottom.
Yeah,
It's always
This
it's always
shifting and shifting.
The other thing is that
and the latency, like the closest thing. That's a good point too.
so I can't remember if the SDK comes as a part of Lighthouse, somehow interacting with Stack or Stack. I wasn't involved in the dev team, but what we put together is a tool that like, it helps with migration planning, because it somehow connects into vSphere, so it can look at the VMware estates, or you can deploy Azure Stack on devices, and so it's just, right sizing for the VMs and stuff. And then the other one is it'll because it's also tapped into the sustainability stats, like you can figure out what your CO2 consumption is going to be in Azure versus, your predictions on your on-premise state. And these days, everyone's so obsessed with that because they're gonna have to report it in their ESG section of their annual reports.
I love your keyboard, by the way. I love it.
This,
Yeah.
especially on a bad programming day when you're trying to work out a bug. Survives.
I love the clicky. I do have also clicky.
But even Azure Arc is used a lot for that, for the on-premise stuff, to monitor today, what do I need to size it tomorrow, so I can migrate around.
I think the problem we're having is we're having trouble getting like. So I'm an and so I don't spend a lot of time, I'm on the application side of things, I don't spend a lot of time having infrastructure conversations, but we seem to be having trouble getting clients to understand the value proposition, because for me, it seems self-evident, like single pane of glass across all of my management and like operational, concern. And, full stop, like and then, but we just seem to have trouble kind of landing the value prop for some reason. I don't know, or maybe the client's just hesitant to leave kind of existing tools they've cobbled together.
Well, the problem you have is the legacy IT infrastructure people that still do infrastructure. Even though stuff is moved to the cloud, they still focus on infrastructure.
Right.
Still have the app teams developing applications, fired over the wall, the support team, the operations team will deploy it. I don't have to worry about it, those kinds of mentalities. So when you start having to have the developer now all of a sudden kind of understand the environment they're deploying to. Granted, they may not necessarily have to understand infrastructure, networking, all that stuff anymore, right? You just have to run that all the time. Now we're trying to make it seamless, in which they just say, hey, deploy, and it should just work.
Yeah.
But the long and short of it becomes, then you start blowing the line between all these different teams, and different teams then start to get worried. It's because, okay, I still have to kind of worry about what's going on over here. I've got to worry about my job over here. How's this team gonna now take what I'm doing tomorrow, and all of a sudden I'm obsolete, so to speak. So you still have a lot of people that still worry about this shifting in those groups, that every time you talk to one, you're gonna upset the other one, you talk to the other group, and they're not gonna understand what you're talking about, because it's we're talking to this group.
And they're so tightly coupled now, like a lot of these people, they're managing, dozens, if not hundreds of custom apps that are not like immediately containerizable. So they don't have like the ability to just be like, oh, no, we're gonna deploy this general, expansive underlying infrastructure in Kubernetes, and then everything's gonna be a container. If they don't, because a lot of these IT teams are struggling to maintain the apps. The apps are coupled to the infrastructure, so their teams get locked in place.
You have to go back to fundamentals when you start to go back to these dev teams about losing the concept of prolific applications, multi-processing. It's got to go down to simple tasks so they can develop, deploy that, move on to the next one. Okay, now how am I going to tie into that? So on and so forth. Decoupling everything that they spent years, if not decades, figuring out how do I cobble all this together in one application. We're talking about completely breaking all those barriers. People just don't either get it or don't want to have to micro slice everything up so that they manage.
Our culture, baby. Yeah.
Change
That's
the
the hardest thing to do. Change code.
Yep, that's right.
Challenge to, like, team I work on. Structure, the app is, so it's basically a platform that amounts of converting monolithic containers and microservices. We have to do it. So we write all our infrastructure right now, we only initial PDK. And we can lower our infrastructure, build it up in 50.
Yeah, we're starting to get to the larger enterprise corporations. A lot of them are jumping on the innovation bandwagon and realizing that they have to turn it on. One organization has to own it all. They're calling themselves platform teams, but the same difference applies, right? They handle networking, they handle deployments, they handle development, they handle everything else. They provide the guidelines for the COE to the business, and the business just has to think of the ideas, put it into code, and say, here, deal with this. And they just deal. So that's what they're starting to move more to. That's what they're calling innovation, or, you know, reimagining a lot of that stuff.
Cool, but are you saying just an extra dev capability would be on the business side of that arrangement?
That's what they're trying to push it closer and closer to, is the business just decides what their rules are. I formulated up in pseudocode even to some extent. Somehow it gets deployed to whatever I need it to do, and it just functions. They don't want to have to worry about, oh, I have to open this port up to talk to this interface, to talk to that. They don't want to deal with that. So how does the business get to that point where they just deal with the platform team and the platform team? Right.
Yeah, so I was gonna show you like it's just a quick demo.
Quick, because Hank put his keyboard away.
Yes.
Anything like that, I put it up.
Yeah, that's it.
Signal.
Keyboard,
Signal. Sorry.
keyboards in a bag.
Yeah, so, start winding it up.
Yeah. Okay. So just a quick demo of like just basically I had other cool demos which for I was really busy, but then let's just do a demo that I'm sure there's something gonna be going wrong, but let's do it together. Let's do it. I'm gonna be really courageous and brave. Yes. So I'm gonna be really brave. Let's do this. Let's do this. Okay. So let's bring a new cluster. So right now I have this thing called Kind. I don't know if you guys worked with Kind before. So Kind, it creates like a basically Kubernetes on your local box that is like, I think using Docker. Use basically it's Kubernetes in Docker, they call it, right? So let's see what I have first. So Kind, get cluster. So I have right now one cluster that I already onboarded, but I'm gonna create a new one. So let's do that. Kind. Great. I don't have a script. I'm just typing it out. Create cluster. I think it needs the name of it, or maybe we just create a default with the default name. There we go. It does create with the default name Kind. So what it does, it basically the requirement is that I have a Docker desktop. It basically I think by default it spins up like one node cluster. You can have multiple node cluster as well. It's all like virtual node, obviously, like it's all backed by it's ensuring the node image. We're using 123.4 starting control plane. Yeah. Yeah, I like Kind because it's just it lets you have multiple cluster locally, and because it's backed by Docker. I think Docker also, like these days, they have also their own cluster as well. They can enable it in Docker desktop, but yeah, that obviously I don't think I wouldn't imagine they're a big fan of Kubernetes because they have their own like solutions for like Docker Swarm and all that, and Kubernetes kind of like took their lunch, and because that's how they make money, because the Docker is free, but that's the part that it makes money for them is anyway. That's it. So now I created my cluster. I think there is export option. Let me see, export kubeconfig. I think it was like just Kind.
The other time to export Kind source code, because whoever wrote this command line, well, has got to have like the nicest comments in their code.
Okay. Okay. So I'm in my brand new cluster that I just created, right? So let's just say, okay, get nodes. I think I should have one node. There you go. It's you know I'm not lying. It's 5:58 seconds ago. That's great. That's CH. So yes. So now let's get this on board to Arc. Let's do it. So it says to identify a Kubernetes cluster, a new existing Kubernetes cluster must be at least version 1.13. That's a requirement, including OpenShift 4.2 or later, access to the port 443 and 9418. So these are the requirement. Azure CLI, an extension for connected cluster, so the connected Kubernetes, Kate configuration, Kubernetes configuration, and Kubernetes extension. I already have those extensions installed. But then you click next, you just put it in a resource group. Let's just put it into the same resource group that I had, Arc demo, and you name it. This is a name that is a Microsoft Microsoft Azure representation of that cluster. So I'm gonna name it actually kind 2. I think I have a kind 1. So there's outbound proxy. It says that you pick the region. You got the only thing you should pick is the region and the resource group, right? It's a region that is going to be onboarded to. So let's pick the South Central. You cluster behind the proxy. If it's a proxy behind the proxy, in this case it's no, but if it's yes, you can just use the proxy server and other details, etc. So that's it. So go to tags if you want to give it a tag name or whatnot. I can add these things, and the only thing now I should do is to run this script, and this script is really simple. It's just AZ login, set the subscription to the subscription, and basically using this extension to onboard this. Since I already log in, the only line I have to run is this single one. So going back here, do this, and it's now getting onboarded. So yeah, the name of it was kind, but because it's in my current context, that's what it cares about. So it's very similar to what Flux is like. So you have like the current context. This is kind. So the name of the kind 2 is the name that is representing on the Azure side. It's like an alias that Azure knows it. It doesn't care what's the name of it. It's as I give it. It's the name that I chose for it.
So it's just asking, so this connected KDS command is asking if you know what the current context is?
Yes.
Okay. So
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. That's how it knows what I'm onboarding. So if I point it to the different cluster, obviously it's going to onboard that one. But obviously I have to have access, proper service account access to the Kubernetes to be able to do that. Well, all it does really, it doesn't twist your cluster or anything. All it does is just creates a namespace called Arc, Azure Arc. I'll show it to you because it was a brand new Kubernetes cluster. So you will see what's actually there right now.
If you were in a new PowerShell session.
Yeah.
And you ran that command.
Okay.
Would it ask you and you have multiple clusters and multiple of these kind clusters running?
What doesn't matter if you have the context, the config for the Kubernetes. You have the Kubernetes kubectl client, which is it's in the config file. So you already have the config file. You have the current context in the config file.
But I thought you had multiple clusters on your box.
You have this current context. So let me show it to you.
There's only one set at any one point.
So let me show it to you. So if you go to the kube config, you can get the context. See that the one that has a star next to it? That's my current context.
Okay, that's the
So and the namespace is the default. So it's actually pointing to that context.
Irrespective of which PowerShell.
Okay, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, I have many cluster that I'm like, here is that most of them are in Azure. I think one of them is in AWS. I don't know. I have many of them.
That's your question.
I just didn't realize about how the
And the kube cover. Yeah.
So this extension is actually does that behind the scene. So this extension connected Kubernetes, that extension is an Azure CLI extension that does that for you. It looks into the current context for kubectl. Behind the scenes, it runs those commands. And I can show you actually what's happening. So I have the K9S here. So K9S is like, you will see it. It's like a visual. I'm a very visual person. I like to see things. I can people like run these commands. So you can see the namespaces. I like the K9S. It's cool. So what it did create for me is that these kube stuff is the system stuff. It came with it, right? The only thing that it did for me right now is this 64 seconds ago is this Azure Arc. So if I go there, this is the stuff that is creating for me on Azure's behalf, right? It creates a namespace, a bunch of containers. I see the status of them containers creating, and let me put this into.
Dude, that screen looks so 1986.
I love this, right? Isn't it nice? I like it. I mean, I'm not that old, but I like it.
I'm not that old. Right.
Actually, this is the
Oh, so as you can see, actually, you watching it live, what's happening in this onboarding process. These are like bunch of agents installing like connected cluster agent. You see the operator, the config agent, all this stuff is goes. If you want to decide to not, this is not going to work for you, you delete that namespace, everything's poof gone. So that's how easy it is. So you can see that, you know, what's there. These are all the pods in that namespace. That they're like, if you want to see, like, I'm sure there are other objects that it creates there. Like I don't know if it was like multi nodes. It was like daemon sets or something for the agents, for the monitoring agents. So there's matrix, there is flux log, as you can see, that does that. So it's doing onboarding. It is very slowly. It's because my computer is slow. Remember, this was a cluster that I created. Now I'm actually so yeah, this computer, I don't think it can take it anymore. It's an old one. My computer was broke, but because of the chip shortages, they actually gave me an older computer. This is like, I think it's 4 years old or 5 years old. I don't know.
4 years old. Yeah.
Yeah,
Is it the Service Book 1?
I think it's so. And this is also there's a 15-inch and this is the 13-inch. I think the 15-inch has a higher spec. I used to have the 15-inch, so I got downgraded. What is it? No, it's not. It's not that. They literally say they don't have the machine, and I was in the middle of the move. I was like, whatever that you have, just send it to me, and they sent me it.
I guess it's better than nothing.
It's better than nothing, right? So the old one that I had, the keyboard wasn't working, the screen was flickering. So this is an upgrade to that for sure. So, okay, I think it's all done. It's everything's up and running. Let's go back to the other tab. So at any minute it should be there. You go. So it's now created successfully. You can see all the settings, and let's go back to the Azure portal. And you can go to the verification, and there you go. It's done. Go to the cluster. You can see it actually says it's a connected cluster. It's kind. It even knows what that is. Some of the times it's like, if it's too generic, it doesn't even say what it is because it doesn't recognize it. But for example, I think that I did it once with the one that so the kind, the K3S, Ranch, these are all recognized ones, so they recognize it. So here you can do things like insights. So for that to work, and you have to actually enable some of the other things. So for example, for looking into the namespaces, you gotta configure the bearer token. So how do you get the bearer token? you got to actually create a service account here. So let's go here. Let me actually show you that before you leave. I know everybody's eager to leave.
Still standing up. So
Yeah, that's a sign that you know that something's standing up. That's
yeah,
it.
You really need to stand right here.
Yeah.
Like ready. You know.
Right.
This is the hint.
Right.
Get on with it, Super. You're
Yeah.
done, mate.
Yes.
Everyone's being really polite.
Yeah. So in case you're wondering what I'm doing and you're wondering why I'm not stopping, I'm basically creating a service account to get the token to get to the cluster from the Azure. So you do this once, you get this token, and you base 64 encoded. I guess it's easier to work with the the bash, but that's okay. I can just do base 64 decode, I guess. Ah, boy. There you go. So this is just the Kubernetes default. So this is going to be my token. So when I paste this in, I should be able to, there you go. Those light up. So you can see all my workloads as if this is a cluster that's on Azure. So you see deployments there, the pods, replica sets, stateful sets, all the stuff that lights up here. I can even go ahead and enable the application inside, not the application inside. It's called a container inside. The application inside you could do as well with enabling the SDK. You can do configure Azure monitoring. There's other steps you have to do, but I can go ahead and see the metrics and logs and all the other goodnesses. So that's it for the demo.
I think that's a wrap.
Yeah, that's a wrap.
All right.